We are in the middle of a dark road, extremely bumpy, very narrow, that can be potentially dangerous because gangsters will wait for your car to get stuck or for people to walk by in order to rob you or even do worse. And now we gotta get out the car. Good Lord. So we get out the car. Alright, so I'm back at my parents' house and I actually came here for 3 specific reasons. Number 1, we pulled it off, we paid off my debt. Number 2, I finally proved to my family that content is a real career, so you can't really force me to go to college. And number 3, my mom offered to take me to Africa, so shoot, we out the country. So here's how the Africa trip went down. Number 1, when I met up with my parents, we hopped on 2 different flights. They were both 8 hours long. The first one we landed in Germany, and then the second one we finally landed in Kenya. And when we landed in Kenya, off rip, I saw how Kenya can be one of those countries you go to and you can get hustled. Here's what happened. So basically, me and my parents, we had like 9 luggages and we had to get them through TSA in Kenya essentially. So they're usually more strict when you're coming outside of the borders. But sometimes when they know that you're a tourist or they know that you're new, they'll try to throw a random penalty on you just so you pay extra money for something. And that's what happened to us. When we were going through TSA, one of the attendants that works there stopped one of our bags and said, "Hey, there's something in here, we gotta check that bag." And we were like, what the heck? There should be nothing serious in that bag. But they insisted that something was in the bag. So they took the bag, my mom got the key, she opened up the bag, and they said, "What's this?" And pulled out a bottle of lotion. What do you mean, what's this? They said, "Oh, $60 penalty." $60 penalty for a bottle of lotion? What are you talking about? So basically, that first interaction at the airport showed me a little bit of a glimpse how corrupt some organizations in Kenya can be. It's not everybody, but it's bound to happen to you if you're a tourist or if you're new. Anyway, once we got through TSA, my grandmother picked us up, we went to her house, and I just went straight to sleep because we just got off of 2 8-hour flights. I was sleep deprived. The next morning I wake up and my grandma tells me like, "Hey, Malik, I built you a house." My name's Malik, by the way. I'm like, "Grandma, you built me a house?" So yeah, basically my grandma built me a small little house on her compound that she's had for over 30 years. And dude, that thing had everything. It had a living room downstairs. There was my own kitchen. When you go up the stairwell, I had my own restroom, my own shower, bedroom, and Wi-Fi. Shout out grandma, shout out Shusha for that. For the rest of this video, I'm gonna refer to my grandma as Shusha. That's what we call our grandmothers in Kenya, or at least in the Kikuyu tribe, because I am a descendant of the Kikuyus. So anyway, I'm like, wow, Shusha, thank you so much for this house. So not too much else happened later that day. But the next day, we had to get ready to drive 100 miles to the Masai Mara Park. And I believe that this is within one of the top 5 biggest safaris that you can experience in Africa. And I was like, yo, this is a great way to start the vacation. So yeah, that morning, a big Jeep pulled into my grandmother's compound. I'm looking at this thing like, dang, this thing got the muscle. And it sure did. Because once we put all our bags on that Jeep, dude, we took off on one of the roughest roads to Masai Mara. And one particular thing about this drive that I did not expect is how mountainous Kenya is. When someone tells you about Kenya, instantly in your mind you would imagine just plains, a flat type of land surface. Bro, Kenya is a mixture of both flatlands and mountains. And there was one mountain in particular that was connected to this huge valley called the Great Rift. Apparently it stretches all the way from Lebanon to Mozambique. It's like 10,000 kilometers long. It's huge. So that was pretty cool to watch as we were driving. But we did notice that a truck almost flipped over and fell into the valley. So it's like, yo, okay, this trip can be dangerous if your car ends up getting into a little bit of an accident. So yeah, traveling along the mountains made the trip a little bit more interesting. Anyways, we ended up passing a lot of towns and we only stopped at one called Narok. Narok was dope. Bro, they've had one of the cleanest public bathrooms I've ever seen, and it was titled VIP. If I were to go back to Kenya, that's the #1 bathroom I would look forward to going to. Anyways, we get done with the pit stop and we arrive. And bro, when I tell you that this place felt like you were literally in the wild, I'm not kidding. Family, you could see a giraffe all the way from the lobby while you're eating your dinner. And I still remember when I saw that giraffe, I was like, dang, if that giraffe is here, that means hyenas, lions, a lot of carnivorous predators could also be here as well. So it was a little bit scary. But what's cool about this park is that they pretty much have a safety fence around our cabins in the lobby. And on top of that, they also had security, the Maasai warriors. Bro, those guys are some dogs. They don't have guns, they don't have pistols, they don't have muskets. They are walking around with spears. If you try these people, they will literally, yeah! I'm like, yo, this is some real deal security. And what we did when we first got there was basically have a little bit of lunch. But after we had lunch, the guy that drove our Jeep truck, Simon, he asked us if we wanted to go take a mini safari before we do the major safari tomorrow. And we're like, yeah, let's go see if we see any animals, which I didn't expect us to see too much. We were only gonna be out there for 30 minutes. But to my surprise, we saw a group of lions sleeping to the side. And I was like, oh shoot, that's cool. Lions are sleeping. But what was so interesting about it is that the way they were sleeping was as if they just had a meal or something. I'm like, huh, I wonder what they just ate. And then when I look to my left, I hear everyone gasp, go, and I'm like, what happened? I turn my head around and I see one of the lions indulging on a zebra. Talk about Mother Nature. That pretty much summed up why all the lions were sleepy. They just had a feast on that one zebra. So yeah, that was pretty much the only thing we saw on the small safari. So then the next morning we had to wake up and go on the big safari. And dude, this was quite the experience. Oh my gosh. First things first, we had our breakfast just to get ourselves full. And then we hopped on the Jeep and we went out to explore. We saw giraffes walking across the path. We saw elephants in the distance. But the wildest thing that happened while we're on the trip was us eating lunch. Because right before we ate lunch, we came across this river that was full of crocodiles and hippos. Definitely on the top 5 list of deadliest animals to encounter in the wild. But what made this so interesting is that right after we saw the deadliest animals in the wild, our tour guide Simon was like, hey, do you guys want to have some lunch? I was like, yeah, sure. So we drove the Jeep truck about 10 minutes out from that deadly river, and he was like, all right, we're gonna eat right here in the middle of the wild. My mom was like, are you sure about this? And he was like, yeah, we're all gonna eat out here. Not gonna lie, I was very skeptical about what the heck we were doing, but we all just got out there and started eating, which everything went fine. But then all of a sudden a large bird appeared after 15 minutes of sitting out there. And I saw that bird, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is a sign that it's time to go. Where there's food, there's predators. We got to get out of here. So we hopped back in the Jeep truck, and I kid you not, we drive around the plains for 5 minutes, and guess what's sitting right there that could have had us for lunch? A lion. Yeah, alright. That was instance number 1. I could have died while going to Africa. There's 2 more instances, so just hang tight for that. So basically, we saw every animal that you could probably see out there, except from like a rhino and a leopard. But before we went back to the camp, we actually stopped at this Maasai village. And bro, when you talk about humble, these people will make you realize the amount of gratitude that you should have. These were very cheerful people. They showed us how they live. They showed us how to start a fire. They showed us how they make their houses. They showed us where they sleep. I'm like, wow. These are the people that are really getting out the mud. Much respect to the Maasai people that live at that park. So anyway, we end up getting back to the camp, and the next morning we're headed back home to my grandmother's house. But on the way back home, we actually stopped at a gift shop on the way there. And I'm like, oh, this is dope. I can buy one of my friends a gift. And they actually had these mini statues made out of curio rock. And I was like, oh, that'd be dope to buy for my friend John that saved me from going homeless, which is another story. So I ended up buying John 3 curio animals for his new apartment, which you guys will see in a later episode. But anyways, we pretty much got back to my grandmother's house and we took the rest of the day easy. We ended up just chilling for 2 days after we got home, but after that, it was time to drive 200 miles to Mombasa, and guess who's driving? So my grandmother is actually a very interesting driver. She's what I would call a risk taker when it comes to driving. At least that's what I saw. And here's where the second instance of me dying came. We have to drive about 10 hours to Mombasa all the way from my grandmother's house. And my grandma's gonna drive all of us, which is me, my mom, Papa Casa, and my sister in the back. But here's the thing, there's really only one major road that you can use to reach Mombasa all the way from Nairobi essentially, and it's Mombasa Road. And this is a very basic road. There's only one lane for each direction, which actually makes traveling a lot harder because if you end up behind a large vehicle, they can slow you down for the rest of the trip. So most people, when they travel on Mombasa Road, you end up going around the trucks essentially. And my grandma loves going around trucks. It's pretty much a video game to her. So much of a video game, she'll overtake multiple trucks at one time if she feels like she can make it, which she was doing a very good job. Like, my grandma was killing it. She's a really good driver for being 68 years old. But there was one instance where we were this close from a full-on collision with a large semi truck. And my grandma is basically a comedian. She just played it off like, even though things almost ended in a disaster. But it's okay, because we're alive, so why are we complaining? So yeah, anyway, eventually we finally made it to Mombasa. And dude, the hotel we were staying at was nice. I'm talking about once we checked in and we went into our rooms, dude, the entire room was made out of sandstone. I felt like I was Aladdin living in this marble home. It was fire, bro. It was dope. We stayed there for about 2 nights. My favorite parts about it was definitely the breakfast. It was an all-you-can-eat buffet, and dog, when I tell you that breakfast literally reset my taste buds on what I think food should be, I kid you not, that was the greatest food I probably had in my 25 years on this planet. They had everything in there. They had stuff I've never even seen. They had this one thing called golden syrup. I put that on my pancakes. I had one bite and I said, wow, that's my new standard. That's the new syrup from now on. That place was amazing. So yeah, after we spent about 2 days at that hotel and explored the city a little bit, it was time to go back home. And guess who's driving? Of course, Shusha. Shusha's driving. And she pretty much does the same game. She avoids trucks and gets us all the way back home. Thank you for driving, Grandma. So now we only had about 2 days left in Africa though. And like I said, there was about 3 times that we almost died on this trip. And I got one more story to tell y'all. Here's what happened. My sister's birthday just recently passed. And yes, I have a sister. I know I haven't told y'all that. Her name's Asia. She's about 1 year older than me. And she lives with my grandma while she's going to college in Kenya. So yeah, her birthday just passed. And I'm like, okay, I gotta get her a gift for her birthday before I leave. So I'm like, let's see, what does she need? She just needs some shoes. So I'm like, okay. Me and my family ended up going to 3 different malls looking for a pair of shoes for my sister, but none of them had good shoes or had the right size for her, which sucked because we spent all day walking through these malls and tomorrow I'm coming back home to America. So we pretty much only had 24 hours to find her some shoes. So we pretty much took the loss and headed home. And guess who's driving? That's right, my grandmother. Shusha's driving. In the car, it's me, Papa Casa, Mama Casa, and one of my grandmother's friends that was apparently helping on the compound. There's 5 of us in the car. My grandma wants to drop her friend off as soon as possible just because he spent the day with us at the mall. So she decides that, hey, let's take a shortcut. And we turn on the darkest, bumpiest, creepiest road I've ever seen. Like, I kid you not, this thing was terrifying. And I could feel in my gut that this was a little bit dangerous. So I'm looking at my grandma and I end up asking her, do you know this road? So who told you about this way, huh?
This road.
Yeah, how you know this road?
I was born here, my papa.
And it looked like apparently she does know the road, but here's the thing. Before we turned on the road, she locked the door. And grandma never does that. She never locks the door unless something's serious. So I asked her, why are we locking the door then? And she said, oh, well, pretty much. You never know when some gangsters are hiding in a bush. I'm like, what? So you're telling me that we're taking a shortcut that's extremely narrow, dark, and dangerous to save some time to get your friend back home? Bro, at that point, I just stopped talking and I barely even wanted to record. Like, that's how off I was on this experience. So I was just waiting for us to get off of that road. But here's what happened. We came across a huge muddy patch covering the entire bumpy road that we were traveling on. I'm looking at that muddy patch like, damn, even a Jeep would struggle to get through that. My grandma just goes for it though in her little Toyota SUV. We hit the mud, the car stops moving. I kid you. The car stops moving. And it's like, all right, let's just back the car up. She puts it in reverse, steps on the gas. We're not moving. We're stuck in the mud. So let me put this in context again. We are in the middle of a dark road, extremely bumpy, very narrow, that can be potentially dangerous because gangsters will wait for your car to get stuck or for people to walk by in order to rob you or even do worse. And now we got to get out the car. Good Lord. So we get out the car. Me, my mom, my grandmother's friend went to the front of the car and pushed as hard as we could while my grandmother was in the car hitting the reverse. And Papa Casa was pretty much just watching her reverse, making sure the car would be fine. So we push. She hits reverse. We end up getting the car out of the mud. It's like, okay. But now we have a decision. Do we choose to drive through this mud again and finish this bumpy road, or risk trying to turn around on an extremely narrow road to where if you fall off the path, your car will fall into a ditch? Which one? Go forward or try to turn around? I voted to turn around. Papa Casa voted to turn around, but my grandmother truly believed that we should try to go through the mud again. So now we were in a disagreement. And my grandma basically wanted to overpower the situation and start to drive the car towards the mud again. And when she did that, I freaked out, bro, because I thought she was basically going to put our lives in danger trying to go through the mud again. So I tried to stop her.
Oh, Shusha, don't do it. Don't do it. Stop. This is stupid. Stop.
So I stopped yelling at that point because my mom said, shh, it's more dangerous if you yell. And here's why it's dangerous if you yell. Since I have an American accent and I'm speaking English, if Kenyan gangsters hear me, they could assume that I'm a tourist and also assume that I have something valuable. So I'm just making the situation more dangerous. So I got quiet, but it was too late. We hear a motorcycle turn on behind us up the hill. And I'm like, no flipping way. Instantly, me, Mama Casa, and Shusha's friend get in the car. But Papa Casa's taking his time. He's like trying to investigate what's going on. He's on white people time. No offense. But white people love taking their time when their lives are in danger. It got so bad that Shusha yelled at Papa Casa, "Ah, James, get in the car!" And like that, Papa Casa kind of woke up and got in the car. But as soon as he got in the car, the motorcycle got to our vehicle. My grandma said that she was talking to the angels at this point, and God would told her to roll down the window and to speak to the men. So she ended up rolling down her window. And I'm looking at her like, no way you just did that. But fortunately, it was just two men on a motorcycle driving home. So then my grandma started having a conversation with them, telling them that we're struggling to make it across this muddy path and if they could help us get across. And they basically told her, yeah, just stay more towards the left side, which I personally didn't believe would make much of a difference. But then I saw them cross the mud on the motorcycle. So I started to have faith again. So my grandmother proceeded to just trust what they said, stay towards the left, stepped on the gas, and we just make it through the mud, dude. We just make it through. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're still alive. We're still alive. That was the third instance where I felt like we almost died in Kenya. The next day I ended up finding shoes for my sister, gave it to her for her birthday, and we left Africa. Moral of the story, don't let your grandma drive.